We're now about to bring to you a very interesting session. Yes, a lot of us have been waiting for it, and we'll bring to you in a very interesting fashion as well. Let's say thank you to technology as we bring to you the financial inclusion, substantive issues, structural constraints, challenges, and the way forward. Ms. Deepali Pant Joshi, Executive Director, Reserve Bank of India, will be joining us for telecon right here, and once again I think it's thanks to technology that we'll be able to witness this. Of course counter questioning wouldn't be possible, but we'd like to take the session ahead, and since it is a technological advancement, I'd like to request my panel to please take this ahead, and do bear with us for a couple of minutes. Of course, in the meantime, I'd like to thank Bank of Maharashtra and all our other partners for having joined us, and we look forward to our next session. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd request you to please bear with us for the next couple of minutes. Thank you.
Can you bear with us? तो बता दो उनको कि she is there.
Yeah, I already told you.
फिर से बोलो है वहाँ पे पूछना है सवाल जिसको. वो बोल दो ये तो तबाह क्यों हो रहा है?
कुछ नहीं.
All house lights be switched off, please. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to thank you for bearing with us. We'd now like to begin with the note from Madam.
To be with you, and what would you like me to address? Which issues would you like me to speak on? I'm all yours now. Hello?
Yes, ma'am, we can
Can I be heard?
you.
Yeah, what would you like me to address? What do you want?
Anyone from the audience?
Do you want
have
me
any? Yes, sir.
questions?
Yes, ma'am, we have a live.
Or you want an
audience
address?
here. We'd
Yes.
appreciate an address from you, post which the
right.
audience will ask a couple of questions.
All right, very good. Thank you. So first of all, let me say how delighted I am to be with you. And I'd just like to discuss financial inclusion. I'd like to tell you that we are not alone. Financial inclusion is at the center stage of international discourse. The G20 countries are also discussing it. More than 50 countries have set targets for themselves. And we are taking the lead because the Government of India and the Reserve Bank of India have a commitment to financial inclusion. So that helps a lot. Now let us go into the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats which this process presents. Now the strengths of the program. As you know, from the year 2005, the Reserve Bank has been engaged in financial inclusion, and we have spoken to the chairman and managing directors of banks and drawn up detailed financial inclusion plans. These plans are owned by the boards of the commercial banks, and they are then disaggregated at the branch level. So, what has been the results? The results have been that the number of banking outlets have increased. Paper diya hai usko. Arun se kahin laye. Arun yahan aaye.
Ma'am, as you continue the address, we'd also like to request you to please talk a little about the constraints that we are facing, and post that we'll ask a couple of questions. I'd request the audience to please write down those questions and pass them on. Ma'am, may I now request you to please continue the address?
Yes, please. I gave you those papers of the new scheme, printed, 3 papers, challenges, issues. All right. Sorry, there's some interruption there. I just want to share with you that the number of banking outlets is increased to 3,84,000. 3,84,000 of these 1,15,350 banking outlets have been opened during 2013-14, and these banking outlets have been opened because we have mandated a policy of branch opening, and that policy is quite simply in continuation of our earlier policies, where people who have been associated with this sector for a couple of decades will recall that earlier, for every 3 rural branches which you opened, you got 1 urban branch. And in the same way, we've said that 25% of the bank branches have to be opened in underbanked areas. So nearly 5,300 rural branches were opened during the last 1 year. And out of these, nearly 4,600 branches were opened in the unbanked rural centers, Tier 5 and Tier 6 centers. And I want to congratulate the bankers who worked very hard to open these branches, to extend the penetrative outreach of the banking system, and to move beyond brick and mortar branches which are costly, which have overheads. 33,500 BC outlets were opened in urban locations during the year, taking the total number of BC outlets in urban locations to 60,730 as at the end of March 14. More than 60 million basic savings bank deposit accounts were added during the last year, taking the total number of banking basic savings bank deposit accounts to 243 million. With the addition of 6.2 million small farm sector credits, there are 40 million such accounts as on March 31st, 14. And with the addition of 3.8 million small non-farm sector credits, there are 7.4 million such accounts as on March 31st, 14. Nearly 328 billion transactions were carried out in BC ICT accounts during the last year, as compared to 250 million transactions during 12-13. That means the transactions in the accounts are also increasing. Now, what are my disappointments with this process? The disappointment is apparent. Though the number of BC ICT transactions has shown considerable increase during the last year, the average transaction per account still remains low. And the focus of our monitoring now is more on the usage of these accounts as against our earlier just creation of access. Now we've taken the horse to water, we have to make the horse drink. And we have to ensure that the customer becomes a customer of the bank and he is extended the entire products and services which the banking system extends, that he has access to savings, credit, remittance, insurance, pensions and regular transfers. You see, most of us make the mistake of believing that poor people do not have access to services. No, that's not so. Poor people have access to all these services. It's just that they do not have access to services from the formal financial system, and that means that they are paying 4 times more than you and I pay for average transactions. Take a simple thing like a remittance. If you are living in Mumbai and your family is in East Delhi, you want to send them some money, if you do not have access to a bank account, how are you going to do it? You are going to look for somebody who knows somebody who will reach your family in East Delhi, and you give the money to him. Now you give him 2,000 rupees, your family gets only 1,800. He claims that he lost the money in transit. He claims that 200 is the transaction fee. In certain areas of Chennai, I found that to save money, illiterate women use another woman. That woman comes every week, and for every 50 rupees that they save, they color a square. And because they are illiterate, and they only come to know the savings from the colored squares. And those squares, for coloring those squares, they are paying much more in fees than you would pay for a savings deposit. That is why it is important to have payments banks and also small banks for which we have issued licenses. Now, there are a number of things which lie in the way, which we have to do fast. You would like to know from me, what have we learned? What are the challenges which lie ahead for us? So what we have learned is, you see, in the existing system, we started in 2005 with the no-frills account. In 2005, we relaxed KYC requirement. In 2014, we have reached a position where we have said that even for migrant laborers, the e-KYC will suffice. Earlier we were focusing on the villages, but we could not cover the full geography. Now earlier we used to have an approach called the Antyodaya, where we took the poorest of the poor families first. Now quite simply what we are saying is that in the new program, the Prime Minister's Jan Dhan Yojana, that is wealth to all people, the Prime Minister's vision is that we should focus on each household, each and every household in the village, and we should allow at least 2 bank accounts. One for the head of the household and one on a gender disaggregated basis. Then earlier we did not have very regular monitoring, though the RBI had invested in significant data analytics, and I'm happy to report that as all the banks are on core banking solution, they were regularly sending us the information which we were collating, and it is on the basis of that information that I could tell you how successful we have been. But now in the new financial inclusion campaign, kya hua? In the new financial inclusion campaign, we will be able to take this up in mission mode. Earlier, our focus was just on account penetration. But as I said, ring them up, account penetration alone does not financial inclusion make. So now, account opening, link.
Ma'am, you can speak.
Now, account opening has to be integrated with direct benefit transfers, credit, insurance and pension. So it's more holistic and it's much more focused. Because you see, if you just give a poor person a bank account, she does not know what she is supposed to do with that bank account. But if you link it to a direct benefit transfer, then money is regularly flowing into my account, which I can then use, and I can use that money for my national old age pension entitlement comes directly, education entitlement comes directly, and it's a big stride forward, because then what was missing earlier was the business case for financial inclusion. Bank did not find it remunerative enough. Now there will be transactions, there will be steady payment per transaction. 2.14% I understand has been discussed by the banks. They're looking at a range of 2.14% per transaction, and that will lead to a revenue stream. Now earlier we used to have offline accounts and there was a technology lock-in with a particular vendor. Now there will be only online accounts. Now what happens in core banking solution, and that is how technology allows us, as technology is allowing me to be with you today, technology allows us to leapfrog the barriers of geography. And when we leapfrog the barriers of the geography, we are able to address the last mile connectivity issues, because you can then go to the doorstep of the beneficiary, as we say in Hindi, BC aaya aapke ghar, aapke dwar. So when you have an online account in the core banking solution, you are not, you're not the account holder of a branch or of a particular banking correspondent. You are an account holder of the entire bank. Then earlier there were no guidelines on the payment of the BC. We used to issue circulars that, the corporates, because there were 3 models of BC appointment. Banks could appoint their own retired people, they could appoint kirana shop owners, or there could be a corporate BC which followed a wholesale retail model. That means they just appointed the BC, or it could be through the common service, the customer service points. So now it has been specified that the minimum remuneration of the BC will be 5,000 rupees. So that will make it simple for the BC to transact and earn. Earlier there was no active involvement of the states and the districts. The financial inclusion plan was disaggregated to branch level, but now there is involvement because there is a state level monitoring committee and a district level monitoring committee. Earlier financial literacy had no focus. So you have a demand side and a supply side. From a supply side, I am inundating you with products and services. From the demand side, you are not able to understand what these products and services are. So now the rural branches of banks have to have a dedicated financial literacy cell. Earlier there was no brand viability. Now the business correspondent is linked closely to the bank. He wears the bank's t-shirt, and the bank also realizes that if he carries the bank's logo about with him, then if he does not fulfill the promises which he makes, it is a reputation risk, a greater reputation risk to the bank. Providing credit facilities was not encouraged earlier. Now we say that if these things are satisfactory, even overdraft facilities can be extended up to 5,000. Earlier there was no clear grievance redress mechanism. Now if you have a grievance, you can go to the state level bankers committee. Right? Chala gaya phir? Phone kijiye.
Ma'am, we can clearly hear you. In fact, one of the audience member has a request to make. If you could please ensure that the RBI regulations would be conducive to march forward vis-a-vis financial inclusions as priority program of the government.
RBI regulations are absolutely in sync, and RBI regulations have created the infrastructure, they have created the steel frame on which we can go on building further. So you need have no qualms about the commitment of the RBI, because the RBI recognizes that financial inclusion can have a multiplier effect on economic growth. As I said in my opening remarks, when 50% of the country which is excluded and marginalized is mainstreamed as a producer and a consumer of goods and services, it has a direct impact on the economy. Let me now come to the challenges which I perceive, because somebody had asked me what are the challenges. So the basic challenge is that in about 50,000 villages we still don't have telecom connectivity. In the hill areas and parts of northeast, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Jammu and Kashmir, in the 82 left-wing extremist affected districts. Then we have to ensure sustainability of the BC model. Then we have to increase the cash transfers through subsidy schemes, including those on gas, fertilizer, kerosene. We have to have deduplication through UIDAI in providing the overdraft facility. And as the RBI governor had very recently explained, and I don't know how many of you have followed that speech, what he said was that we have to have 5 P's. We have to have a product which is sustainable to the needs of the poorer people. It has to be at the right place. It has to be linked to their income stream. And the price has to be adequate. Protection has to be extended to poorer people, and the RBI is strongly working on a customer charter, which is also on our website. You can look at it. And profit is something which is not a bad word. It has to be ensured. And how do we do this at the grassroots level? I'll just tell you 3 things. 1, you have to correctly identify the poor people for really strong targeted interventions. 2, you have to link to bank accounts. And 3, you have to seed these bank accounts with the UIDAI number, and you have to roll out the government schemes through these bank accounts. So you see, we have always been technology driven in our financial inclusion model as the Reserve Bank, and we have been technology platform neutral. We have allowed a combination of branch and BC structure to deliver financial inclusion, ICT based accounts, that is in communication technology based accounts through the BC, corporate BC, individual BCs. All we have insisted on is that the distance criteria we used to have earlier, we have dispensed with that now, and direct benefit transfers validating the identity of the beneficiary through Aadhaar, we felt will be very, very important. Going forward, we feel that there are information asymmetries, information vulnerability is a key challenge, and we have to look at it. We have to increase transactions, and banks must revamp their structures for carrying out banking operations. And there cannot be any one-size-fits-all effort. We have also laid great emphasis on financial education, which will increase literacy levels. We say, step into a bank, step out of poverty, and we want the banks to sensitize their frontline managers to this message. For financial inclusion, we said there are three sides to the triangle. At the apex is financial education, and at the bottom is financial stability. So financial inclusion, financial education, and financial stability, and this way prosperity lies. Because you see, there is a moral dimension, there is a moral imperative of this program, but there is also an efficiency concern. A moral imperative because if we are to grow into a just society, we must ensure that the last man standing also has access to all the facilities. We cannot have a banking system which is only for the classes. It should also be for the masses. That we've been trying since 1969, and our message is that for a society which is an equitable society, for a country which is going to be a superpower in my lifetime and in yours, it is essential to have an equitable society, and therefore it is the dream and the vision of Prime Minister Modi, which we and Finance Minister Mr. Jaitley, which we want your help, because together we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, ma'am. We truly appreciate your presence, your address, and of course, thank you for addressing the couple of questions as well and telling us more about the kind of challenges you and your team face. Once again, as we thank ma'am, we'd also like to come to the close of the session. I hope each one of you enjoyed and are taking back something from the series. And as I thank each one of you, I'd like to request you to put your hands together for yourselves for being such a perfect audience. And of course, the event's been powered by Bank of Maharashtra and brought to you by ET Edge. I'd like to thank our partners for being a part of this very, very special series, and we look forward to closing the disparities in the future. Thank you so very much for joining us.